It is the Banner Baseball Live Show. Paul Mancano back up here in Baltimore, joined by Danielle Allentuck, who is still down in beautiful, slightly windy, but gorgeous, sunny, warm Sarasota, Florida. Danielle, what a chore it is for you to be down there in such beautiful weather. It is actually nice in
I
Baltimore
know.
this week, but this past weekend was a little bit brutal. And boy, was I pining for the backfields at Ed Smith Stadium complex.
At least you're not getting burned, you have
That's
that
true.
advantage.
That's true. I did come back with a little bit of reddish skin, but the great part is it's all farmer's tan, so it'll look terrible when I go to the beach. Danielle, we got a lot to talk about here on today's show. We've got some Grapefruit League action now under the Orioles belt that we can discuss and try to draw some conclusions from meaningless games against opponents that may or may not be big league caliber squads. But let's talk about the outfield competition. Let's start with Colton Cowser because he had the walk-off home run in the Orioles' first game of the spring, and that was broadcast on Masson. Corbin Burns started that game. Jackson Holliday started that game. An exciting game for a lot of reasons. Colton Cowser sent everybody home happy, and he's been off to a great start so far this spring, hitting .333 with 3 walks and that walk-off homer.
He has. I mean, he's looked really strong, really comfortable. And there's a really interesting thought that John Mioli, our columnist, brought the other day was with Colton Cowser, I mean, he has the stuff. He just needs to decide, is he going to be a power hitter or a hitter for average? Because he really can't do both in this day and age. So I think now that Colton's kind of got more of a direction of where he wants to be and what type of major league hitter he's going to be, he seems a lot calmer. He seems a lot more on pace, and he just looks really good overall.
Yeah, we know he hit just 115 in his introduction to the big leagues last year and was sent back down to AAA.
Which was really only what was that, 8 games or something? Like, he really didn't get that big of a look last year.
Yeah, it was not a large enough sample size, really, for us to make a determination on his long-term future. We've seen guys come up. Adley Rutschman struggled for his first 6 weeks in the big leagues. Gunnar Henderson struggled to start the 2023 season. So it happens.
6 weeks of struggle, yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time, no matter how talented or quote-unquote big league ready the prospect is. But I think it's interesting when you compare him to Heston Kjerstad, another top prospect in the Orioles system, another outfielder, another left-handed hitter. And there's a lot of question as to whether both Heston Kjerstad and Colton Cowser can make this opening day roster. We got a lot of spring training baseball yet to be played and a lot to be determined. But where do you stand on the possibility that both of these guys could break camp with the team?
I don't really think that there's a path for both of them. I think that they serve very different purposes. I mean, Colton is really strong on defense. Heston's a great power hitter and brings that potential. But if you're penciling Jorge Mateo and if he's capable of playing center field, that kind of eliminates one of your outfield positions too. They're able to pull in another infielder then and another utility guy. And with Heston too, you have to think, does Ryan O'Hearn kind of fill the same role that Heston would, being a mainly DH guy? So I don't think there's space for both. I think it's really early in spring training to know kind of who has the edge at this point. But I would expect both of them to play significant time in the majors at some point this year.
Yeah, regardless of who makes the opening day roster, I think, like you said, both of these guys, barring a trade or an injury, is going to get a significant amount of playing time. But yeah, it's a fascinating question because you also have Ryan McKenna in the mix, who is now out of options. He's a right-handed hitter, but he presents a lot of upside as a base running threat, as a defensive player who can play all 3 outfield positions. You know, he may never hit more than 10, 15 home runs in a big league season. He may never hit 300 in a big league season. But when you're looking for a 4th or 5th outfielder, he certainly fits the kind of mold that you would look for. And I think it's also interesting when you look at, what Heston Kjerstad did last spring and at the end of last year. He finished the season on the big league roster and he was on the postseason roster. This time last spring, we were talking about Heston Kjerstad dominating Grapefruit League action. He hit .381 with 4 homers, 4 doubles, and a triple in 42 at-bats, and people were saying maybe he could jump all the way up to the big leagues. Now, it took him a while to get the call up to the big leagues, but he eventually made it. But I think it's also interesting when you look at, these two guys, Colton Cowser and Heston Kjerstad. Spring training games are spring training games, and they may not mean anything at the end of the day, but maybe the Orioles have to make a decision based off of, 6 weeks of game action here.
So, I mean, I always say with spring training games, It doesn't matter if you do bad in a spring training game. That won't necessarily impact you. If you do well in a spring training game, that can only help you. So if Colton's able to put up big numbers in a spring training game, they may like, okay, he's made improvements there. He's more comfortable. Maybe that's enough reason to push him over the edge there. So, I mean, spring training results don't mean everything, but they do evaluate them and take a long look at them.
Yeah, and then one more guy who has gotten left out of this discussion probably too frequently is Kyle Stowers, another left-handed hitter, probably more of a traditional power hitter than somebody like Colton Cowser, but he can play, solidly defensive right field, which for Heston Kjerstad, we're still not sure if that's true. Brandon Hyde kind of dodged your question when you asked early in camp about whether they're focusing on Heston Kjerstad's outfield defense. He said, we're focused on everybody's defense at this point. But Kyle Stowers, he has gotten big league action in 2 seasons. He had some injury trouble last season, but a guy who, can provide something in the big league level, but it just may take a bunch of injuries for him to be able to get back in the rotation and be considered, with as much upside as Heston Kjerstad or Colton Cowser.
Yeah, Stowers has kind of dropped down the list a little bit over the past couple years due to those injuries, like you said. But he did look really good yesterday. It was just one spring training game, but I think he's an intriguing name to keep an eye on. I kind of see him being the type of guy who it kind of goes back to AAA to start the year. He gets called up for an injury, and I think he just needs like a solid block of major league time to show what he can do, and I think he'll be able to hang once he gets to that point.
Yeah. Well, one other guy that I do want to talk about before we do a prospect check-in would be Cole Irvin, a left-handed starter. Obviously, he's going to probably start the season in the rotation because John Means is a month behind. There's a big lefty, and because Kyle Bradish is still recovering from a UCL injury. So Cole Irvin is going to get his shot, and we saw one start in spring training, and it was very good. 2 perfect innings, 3 strikeouts. He talked in an interview with Brendan Mortensen early in the spring about how he has changed his repertoire. He's working on a cutter that was really only part of his repertoire for the second half of last season, only threw it 15% of the time. Now he's working on it as a pretty main pitch, and his 2-seam / sinker, whatever you call it. He has boasted about how it has a lot more movement than it previously did. It used to have 14 to 16 inches of horizontal movement. Now he's saying it has 18 to 20 inches of horizontal movement. All these guys talk during the spring about, how improved they are, all the things they worked on over the winter, and then we see it in game action, and sometimes it doesn't all come to fruition. We've seen now Cole Irvin, and for just 2 innings, he looked very, very good.
He did. Very impressive how he kind of looked at himself in the offseason and said, all right, the league knows who I am now. I've been out here for a couple years now. I didn't have the best results last year. What do I need to do to take the next step forward? And so for him, that was kind of revamping his pitch mix a little bit. He had the slider, it was about 78, the curveball, about 74. And he knew he needed something against right-handed hitters to keep him off balance. So he started watching other guys, pitching ninja. He looked at Corbin Burns, and he kind of reimagined what he's going to do, changed up his grip a little bit, and his velo has been way up so far. It was 94, 95 the other day.
Yeah, even hitting 96 according to the in-stadium radar gun, which would be his fastest pitch ever if it were recorded in a big league game. So we'll see if that translates over to the regular season, and he's got several more spring starts and spring appearances to make. Let's touch in on some prospects that we've seen so far. Cade Povich, a lefty who probably on the outside looking in when it comes to this rotation conversation, maybe will make his big league debut later in the season. He's just 23 years old. Through 2 innings, allowed 1 hit, walked 2, struck out 2 against Tampa Bay. Kind of the B squad of Tampa Bay, not exactly all of their starters. Somebody who has great strikeout potential, great stuff. But a similar conversation to another lefty, former lefty of the Orioles system, DL Hall. For Cade Povich, it's commanding his stuff, and it's making sure that he is not walking too many guys. Those 2 walks, not a great sign. But he is going to get to the big leagues eventually based off of his strikeout stuff. Maybe it's as a starter, maybe it's as a reliever, but it's nice for us to get a kind of first-person look at him this spring.
Agree. I mean, I haven't seen him pitch before. I mean, I'm impressed with just sort of the stuff that he has and the raw talent there. I think he does go back to AAA to start the year, mainly spend most of AAA there. He's one of those guys, like with Chase McDermott, that where they have to balance. Should we get them that major league experience and bring them up in the bullpen, or keep them on the starter track? And I think for those two, they want to keep them on the starter track and not kind of stunt that development at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we only see them if an injury occurs, if something else happens. But they like his stuff. He's made a lot of improvements. I'm curious to see, more action this spring, what he looks like.
Yeah, and then another guy who kind of fits into that McDermott, that Povich kind of time frame is Seth Johnson, who is a little bit behind just because he had Tommy John surgery when, I believe, right around the time he was traded for, when the Orioles acquired him at the trade deadline in 2022. So he's missed a lot of time. He made only one start in Double-A last year, but we got to see him a little bit yesterday, and he impressed so far. A guy who, is still highly regarded as a top prospect in the Orioles system, but given his lack of minor league experience, may take a little bit longer than Chase McDermott or Cade Povich.
And Hyde was talking about him today. For him, it's just getting those innings out of the way. They think he has major league stuff. They really like how he looked yesterday, but he's missed a lot of time, and they just need him to catch up a little bit and have sort of a normal year. So that's their goal for him. But he is on the right track right now. They like where his progress is.
Then a couple hitters we should touch on. Kobe Mayo, just 22 years old. He continues to absolutely mash the ball. We saw him get all the way up to AAA last year. Danielle, during the offseason, you had him potentially making this opening day roster, mashing his way onto the team. And I may have chuckled a little bit at the time. I'm not chuckling now.
You did. Yeah.
Because he is looking great.
He is. And, everybody kind of knows he can mash and play. That's no surprise there. But what has really surprised them so far is his defense. I mean, Hyde was talking this morning. He has come a long way at third base, and they're really happy with where he is. I still think it's a long shot to make the team, even though I did predict that. But he's somebody that I expect to see mid-year next year. I think he needs to either just absolutely destroy AAA to get called up, or an injury. I don't really see a path for him on his opening day roster anymore, but he's looked really impressive. He's definitely on their radar.
Yeah, Ramon Urias and Jorge Mateo, the kind of veterans, still expected to make this team. It's tough to imagine them getting, leapfrogged for somebody like Kobe Mayo in the short term, but maybe eventually, we might see it. He's 3 for 4 with a double and 2 walks to start spring training. And then a couple of the younger guys that we've gotten to see so far. Enrique Bradfield Jr., also 22 years old, which is crazy because he was just drafted in the 2023 draft, was the Orioles' first-round pick out of Vanderbilt. He had a single and, of course, a stolen base to start his Grapefruit League action. This guy is going to be flying all over the base paths. He was one of the fastest players in college baseball history. That is what he brings to the table, in addition to great outfield defense. But he's going to be fun to watch. At least anytime he gets on base, it's just going to be a track meet for this guy.
It really is. I mean, his single the other day was just a little blooper over the pitcher, but he easily outran it. I mean, I don't think most guys can do that. That's going to be his advantage. He is going to make teams because of his speed. I think he's going to rise up to the system pretty quickly. I by no means expect to see him this year, but he's got that unique skill set that I don't really think any of their other prospects have at this moment. So they're definitely counting on him for 2 to 3 years down the line, when they're probably going to lose some of these veteran outfielders who are going to be free agents soon.
Yeah, you're talking about Austin Hayes and Cedric Mullins, both scheduled to hit free agency after the 2025 season. You talked with Austin Hayes in an article on thebaltimorebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, about the possibility of an extension and how maybe a change in ownership might open the door for that for Austin Hayes and maybe eventually Cedric Mullins. A lot of these guys that are, hitting the middle years of their arbitration years, and they might look to stay. But right on their heels, you got Enrique Bradfield Jr. You also have a number of other outfield prospects. Judd Fabian, Dylan Beavers, John Rhodes have all gotten action this spring. They're all members of the 2022 draft class. So they were all picked right after Jackson Holliday, who, of course, has outshone the bunch, but he has outshone every other prospect in baseball. All three of those guys yet to get a hit in Grapefruit League action. So, maybe temper your expectations for this class of guys other than Jackson Holliday this year.
Dylan Beavers in particular, I've heard a lot of talk about. They like him a lot. They think he has really good stuff. But for the others, I mean, this spring it's just felt getting a glimpse at major league pitching, even if it's in the eighth, ninth inning, just kind of getting that experience, seeing what it's like to be around the major leaguers, maybe getting to, go against a major league pitcher in one of these spring games. So they have a long way to go. They're still a few years off, but this experience is just so vital for them in their development.
Absolutely. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for joining us here from Sarasota. You've got a game to cover in a little over an hour at Ed Smith Stadium. So thanks so much for your insight. At D_Allentuck is her Twitter handle. I am at Paul Mancano and also at All Banner Sports. And follow Danielle to see all the good dog content as well. You've been tweeting out all the great pups that you've seen down there.
That is my main objective down here, to pet as many dogs as possible.
That was mine when I was down there too, so I can't even begrudge that. And certainly hit up some of the restaurants that Jordan Westberg recommended in his video as well on at All Banner Sports. But Danielle will have plenty more coverage. You and Andy Koska and John Mioli and Kyle Goon all down from Sarasota, Florida. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch